when you have that dash between the year you're born and the year you die, that's your mark on the world. And I want to be known as a difference maker. I want to be known as someone who made the world around them a little bit better for other people.
Welcome to this episode of She and Success. I'm Antoinette Olo, and I'm super excited for this episode. Today I'm speaking to Carol Enneking. Carol is an accomplished speaker, consultant, and the author of the Amazon bestselling book, The Rebalancing Act, which has honestly gone on to become more a movement than just a book. In this conversation, Carol shares the incredible journey that she's had. She's gone through numerous life resets, from having a divorce, experiencing cancer, or going through cancer, and even going blind, of all things. We talk about women and work. We talk about what is now being called midlife collision, as well as what can happen when you finally choose to surrender, let go, and trust that things will be okay. Enjoy. Hello, Carol. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for joining She and Success.
Yes, thank you, Antoinette. I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. I'm so grateful for you obviously spending the time to come and share your experience with us and to talk about your book, your best-selling Amazon bestseller. So you're Carol Enneking. You are an author, a consultant, and a speaker. And as I've just mentioned, also the best-selling author of the Rebalancing Act. So really looking forward to finding out more about you, your experiences, and the book. And I've been diving into the book, I'll be honest. It's exciting. It kind of sometimes it gets your blood boiling when you're reading about all the things that are still going on.
Isn't it though? It's unfortunate.
Yes, definitely.
When I interviewed, I was like, really?
Yeah, I know.
Did this happen a long time ago? They're
Yeah.
like, no, it happened 2 years ago. And I'm thinking, wow.
How has this still happened? Exactly. So we're looking forward to delving into the Rebalancing Act. Here it is. And also your learnings, obviously, from the people you've spoken to through the writing of the book, and also your own experiences and kind of what led you to write this book in the first place. And so that we can obviously learn from your experiences and the experience of others. So take us through, before the Rebalancing Act, how did you get to kind of writing this book and kind of what inspired it?
Yeah. So I think I always knew that someday I'd love to write a book and do public speaking, but it was sort of a faraway dream. But I was this type A personality. And I basically was living my life according to plan. So checking boxes, I suppose, would be a description of it. But it was like, okay, I'm doing this next. I got my job, got my college degree, got married. Everything was a series of checking boxes and things were going according to plan. I don't know whose plan. It was just the plan, right? You're raised with these norms and expectations. And I just thought that was how life was supposed to be. And I would delve into everything in front of me with incredible energy, but it was not a recipe for personal fulfillment. Mm-hmm. So whether it was raising kids, working at a job, forming my first company, my marriage, my relationships, I was all in for everything. But it was like they have so many cliches for this. And even though I knew I was burning the candle at both ends, or I was, sacrificing my own well-being, it didn't seem to matter. And it wasn't that I didn't know better or didn't have a voice or anything like that. I was just busy. I was so busy all the time. And it was like the days just went by so quickly that I didn't really have time to pause and reflect. And so even when things weren't going so well in my life, I was a fixer. I was going to maybe be sad for a second, but then I was always going to jump into problem solving mode and fix things, control whatever I could. If I couldn't control it, then I'd move on, but I would just constantly be trying to get better, be better, do better. But it was almost like this vicious cycle that left no energy surplus whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And so when things didn't go right, or when there was a curveball, a medical issue, I can remember a doctor telling me I needed to have my gallbladder removed. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I'll fit that in right after my business trip and this conference and that engagement. And then I ended up having a much worse procedure because I had complications because I didn't listen to the doctor. But that was kind of how my life went. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so I think the real catalyst in a lot of this was suddenly, unexpectedly facing a divorce. Mm-hmm. And so I knew my marriage wasn't great. I knew it hadn't been great for a long time, but I was very consumed with working and kids and all the things. And so I think I just sort of decided not to deal with that. It was like, someday it'll get better, but I wasn't really enacting a plan to make it better. And then something happened that finally led me to say, I can't do this anymore. And he was having an affair. I'll be honest about that. Because I think when you say it was a sudden divorce, people are like, oh no, what happened? Did he just up and leave? No, it's just that I figured out he was having an affair and I wasn't up for sticking around for that because it wasn't the affair. I mean, we had two kids, they were teenagers, college was around the corner. I needed stability. All of a sudden, and I think that's why a lot of times people don't necessarily think about divorce because
Of
all of a
course.
sudden it's two houses,
Mm.
two rooms for the kids, and you don't want to do that to your kids necessarily. At least that was what I thought. I'd rather keep the family together at all costs just to avoid all of that. But when it's staring you in the face, it's like, okay, time to let go of all that, and in the process let go of what everybody thought. I was so consumed with doing things the right way and the way I was supposed to, and I worried way too much about what everybody thought. What will people think of me if I'm a failure at my marriage? I did not like to fail. I did not like to quit. And so I was like a dog with a bone, and I would just keep at it and keep at it and keep at it, which can be a wonderful trait. But you have to know when to let go and when to cut your losses too. And you also have to realize, first of all, people aren't spending nearly as much time worrying about me as I think. They really care what I'm up to. And the people who are my friends are going to be my friends anyway. And when I said, you know what, I failed. You know what? He was having an affair. I mean, that takes a little vulnerability to go out there and say, yeah, right in this moment, my husband chose someone else.
Mm.
And I don't know, it was more about the circumstances probably. And we tried to reconcile. And, it wasn't necessarily just a referendum on him choosing someone else, but it was just a symptom of a much bigger issue. But I had to go out there and just say it because it was my reality. And the people who were my friends would stick by me, and the people who weren't, I just couldn't worry about. I had to worry about my kids. I had to worry about myself, my life, just the logistics of making this all happen. But it really caused me to rethink everything. And I don't think that was evident at first. It's just that now I can look back. It's been over 11 years, and I can look back and say that was the day my life started to change.
Right.
And it did. And I was able to finally decide how to do things the way I wanted to do things instead of what I thought I should do. So that was kind of the first part of my rebalancing act. But what was interesting is I kind of along the way, I started pouring all that energy back into my corporate role.
Mm-hmm.
And that was wonderful. And it served me well. And I climbed the ladder, and I learned how to be a leader on the inside after being on my own for 18 years. And I wouldn't trade that for the world, but I was still that type A personality. And I reached a point, I had breast cancer. This was right in the right in the beginning of the pandemic. I was facing breast cancer. I faced blindness. I've had several cornea transplants to restore my vision. And I had all the challenges with the kids growing up and needing me in new and different ways. What do they say? Bigger kids, bigger problems. I mean, they were going through college and COVID and all the things. And I'm proud and happy to say they're wonderful, thriving adults now. But there were a lot of anxious moments. I found love again. That was amazing. But I was still just burning the candle at both ends until my body finally started to say, this isn't working for you. And even after fighting breast cancer, I went back in and worked a lot and wanted to get promoted and all that good stuff. And then I got high blood pressure and diabetes. And it was finally like, why am I doing? What am I doing? And why am I doing it this way? And why am I giving everything to other things and not to myself? Why am I not prioritizing exercise and nutrition and sleep and health and peace and time? And so that was the second part of the Rebalancing Act. So it's a transformation that has taken many years and several different forms. And it was funny because I thought it was just me. And then I decided to write the book finally and take the time. And I started interviewing other women, and I started realizing it wasn't just me. There were all these women who are sacrificing so much for so many others, and then finding out that they're just burned out. And what's funny is, we've all heard about midlife crises, that men, and we laugh about the midlife crisis for men, and hey, let's just go buy a Ferrari or whatever thing will make us feel young and awesome. For women, they're starting to release research that calls it a midlife collision.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it felt like for me. It was kind of this collision of my personal circumstances, my work circumstances, my health, my children, my aging parents. I haven't even mentioned that, but I've been helping with aging parents. My father has Alzheimer's. That was requiring more time, not just for me, but thankfully I have siblings and we were all working on that. But it's a privilege to be able to take care of your parents, and you want to have time for that. But it's this collision of all the things, and something's got to give. And I think a lot of women in their midlife end up having these things all collide. That's what happened for me, and that's what's happened to a lot of women. And that's why I'm so passionate about trying to help people figure out what matters most and go for that, and leave the rest of the stuff behind so that they don't end up like I did, where they're just depleted and their body is finally sending them enough signals that they can't ignore it anymore.
Going to say your body tried, didn't it? Even with
It did.
the cancer, you said you kind of tried to just keep plowing on through and keep going, and it
Yeah.
kind of had to go again and again, and it took a long time for you to actually listen. Wow.
It did, and it was so funny because I thought, "Oh, I'm just weak
Mm.
now. Like I'm getting older. I'm more frail. I guess my body just isn't meant to be this strong anymore." And then, I mean, thank God I looked at those limiting beliefs and that self-talk and started challenging it, because I started working out with a trainer and I lost 35 pounds, and I started lifting weights. And I'm not lifting weights like to be a weightlifting champion. I'm just lifting weights to build muscle mass and sculpt my muscles. And I'm stronger. I'm stronger than I was in my 20s. Here I am in my 50s. And I'm like, okay, I can be strong. I can be strong. I can be physically fit, and I can be healthy. And you know what? My body is happy that I'm doing that. So it's funny how it's so easy to creep into that self-doubt, that self-talk. Maybe this is just my new reality. It doesn't have to be, but you got to be intentional. And I'm working really hard to try to make sure that I'm taking care of me. And I don't know, why do we think that's selfish? Why do we not take time to do that?
Exactly. I think from what you've said, you've given us so much to unpack already. So I think one of the key things that the messages that's coming through is this thing around never actually giving time for you, and not making choices for you, and not choosing you. What I'm excited and really looking forward to packing with you is this topic around, firstly, the choices that we make, and who we're making these choices for, and kind of what's driving them, and how so many of us for a very long time are making decisions and choices because we feel like these are the things that we should be doing, and kind of we're down these roads, and it takes a long time, or it takes, as you said, this collision before we think, actually, what's actually my life and what's going on. So
Yeah.
talk us through, I guess, with this collision, because you went through a lot of lessons even before the book, with the divorce and with the cancer, and even with, obviously, with COVID and things. I guess by that point, before writing the book, kind of where was your head at? Where were you at that point?
Yeah. I think before writing the book, I was thinking, I just need to take some time just to think,
Mm,
because my entire adult life had been spent working full time and doing all the things. And I think people thought my typical type A personality would just grab the next job and go. And I think I surprised everyone, including myself, when I said, I'm just going to take some time off. And I called it my sabbatical.
mm-hmm,
But I don't know that we ever just take the time to do that. We might take a weekend if we're lucky,
mm,
but just thinking about what really matters. And I think for me, the question was, what do I want to be known for when I leave this earth, or when I leave the work world, or this stage of life or whatever it is, what do I want to be known for? Because 10 or 15 years ago, if somebody would have been asked, probably pre-divorce, so maybe call it 15 years ago, if somebody would have said, describe Carol, they would have said, she gets so much done. It was almost like what I would have been known for was how I could tackle a to-do list. Something. But they also probably would have said she seems to carry a lot of stress. She may not have as much fun as she should. She doesn't laugh as much as she should, that kind of stuff. That's not how I want to be known. You know, when you have that dash between the year you're born and the year you die, that's your mark on the world. And I want to be known as a difference maker. I want to be known as someone who made the world around them a little bit better for other people. When you have that dash between the year you're born and the year you die, that's your mark on the world. And I want to be known as a difference maker. I want to be known as someone who made the world around them a little bit better for other people.
Mm.
And so thinking about that and backing up from that to think about what do I need to do today to start living that way, that made me realize, because I really was I kind of had one foot in two worlds. One was do your own thing, write that book, share that message, inspire others to the extent that you can. And then the other one was go back to the safety of corporate.
Yeah.
You're a cancer survivor, you need insurance, it's smart for retirement. Just do that for 10 more years and then go do the inspiration. And it was funny because the other choice that I made in that moment was based on my faith. And so I know people have a lot of different faiths. For me, I am a Christian. Whatever your beliefs are, I think having that belief in something bigger and higher than just you, that it's not just about me and what I want. I'm part of a bigger plan. And when we realize just how big this universe is and how small we are, what are we meant to do while we're here? And what are we uniquely gifted for? And it's funny that it took me this long to just give it up to the Lord and say, lead me, and say, take me where you intend for me to go so that I can do the best work that you've created me to do. And maybe it was financial, maybe it was expectations, I don't know. But in my 20s and 30s, I couldn't just surrender like that. I couldn't just trust that everything was going to be okay. I still felt like I had to do my plan. Like I needed to have the answers. And so just surrendering to this higher power was so powerful for me, because some doors opened and other doors closed. And I don't necessarily even today know where the path is leading. I always tell people, I don't know exactly where this is all headed, but I'm here for it. But it's just so nice to know that every step that I'm taking is helping to make that path unfold. And that's how I knew going back to corporate wasn't right. And that's how I set about writing the book.
I love that. So much gold there. The thing you talked about, this surrendering piece, do you feel that having gone through, I guess, the things that you went through kind of laid the foundation or laid the kind of groundwork for that? Because once you've gone through, you talked about going blind, you had the cancer. These are things that, nobody knows that these things are going to happen. You can't plan for that. You can't be prepared. And so I guess with all the will in the world, even if you're a type A and you kind of can do all of the things, suddenly these things come along and it's like, and so once that's happened, do you feel that you then were in a place where actually you began to realize that actually there is no controlling everything? Did it in a way, obviously it must have been very extremely difficult, but did it make it easier to surrender having gone through those extreme challenges?
Probably so. And I like the way you put that. That was a very good synopsis of kind of how this evolution happened. And I think, though, that one thing I've realized in facing these challenges is that I can't always prevent bad things from happening, but I can try to use the bad things that happen for good. And I do know that the Lord has carried me through all these tough times. And just when I think something is my darkest day, my darkest hour, something comes along that carries me through it. And so it's that hope for the future that was always there. But I started to realize the more that I just held on to that hope and the less I felt like it had to be my plan, the more I was able to be blessed by the unexpected, because we can carry on with our own path and our own plans so long, but gosh, what might we be missing by not embracing the uncertainty there? And I tried so hard to have that uncertainty. I do laugh and say, I think the day that I realized my life was no longer my own was the day I had children. Because all of a sudden, you've got these little human beings that are completely dependent on you. And it's up to you to make sure that they're fed and nurtured and that they grow and have health and all those kinds of things. And so, you do have to start having that surrender to some degree. But I think it's also ironic. I always laugh and I say, the Lord gave me the children he gave me to teach me, because I've seen parents, and that's kind of what led me to the book and the archetypes in the book too, because I've seen parents try to sort of live vicariously through their children.
Yes.
And they want their children to be a certain way, and they feel like if they project that and manifest that and prioritize that the kids will fall into that mold, and then inevitably they couldn't be more different, right? So you think your kids are going to be cut from a certain mold, and then you find out that they're so different than you or than you thought, and they have different interests. And so it's funny how, like, I would fall into the trap of being that overloaded, we call it in the book, overloaded Olivia.
Yes, we'll definitely go on, talk about these archetypes.
It's not, everybody's not like me. And I knew that. And that's why I wanted to interview other people. But there are some common traps. And so that's how we came up with the archetypes, as we started listening to the stories people had to tell and the traps that they fell into. And it started to centralize around these themes that became the archetypes. And so it's funny how the more you try to have a plan and the more you try to live your life this way, the more that can become a problem for you, because you got to be able to be agile and adapt to changing circumstances. I mean, the world around us changes
Gosh,
so fast.
definitely.
So,
Definitely.
yeah.
So let's talk about the book and these archetypes. So firstly, the archetypes themselves, there's 7 of them. And one of the things you said, which I definitely felt was so true reading it myself, is that I was able to pick up a number of them, or a few of them, let's say, that I was like, oh my goodness, yes, that's definitely the most of me. But then I've also been that one, and I've also been that one, and oh my goodness. But it's very, very, very true. So what? Yeah, talk us through these archetypes then that kind of came out through the interviews that you had with all of the people that you interviewed for the book.
Yeah. So the interviews were great because it started out with me just asking favors of friends,
Right.
people who I knew had either successfully balanced all of the things in their career, or people who I knew might have good insights or want insights. So I just started talking to people I knew, and then they would say, you should talk to so and so. You should talk to so and so. And there were plenty of people that I ended up speaking with that I had never met. And I did all the interviews, but I also enlisted my best childhood friend, Bethany Bradshaw. Her name's on the cover. She's a ghostwriter, and she's also written her own books. But normally people have ghostwriters all the time and you never see their names. But I did want to put her name into it because I laugh and say if it weren't for Bethany, I'd probably still be on chapter 1. But she helped me organize things. So I would do the interviews and transcribe them. Thankfully, there's a lot of technology to help with that. But she would start listening to the stories and putting them into themes. And we started out with more archetypes.
Right.
But then we found some that sort of dovetailed each other and combined some. And it was just funny because we could see in these stories the ways women typically show up. And depending on the job, depending on the circumstances, I identified with quite a few of them. So it's not a you're always this way. But I think as we grow and we evolve in our journey, we tend to take on some different ways of showing up. But in every way that we show up, there are traps that can come up. And so it's not saying that that's a bad way to show up. It's just saying you got to be mindful of these traps and be able to work through them so that you can be successful. So, for instance, being overloaded. A trap of being overloaded is you'll be like me. You'll end up with all these things competing for your attention, and you won't do a very good job of sorting priorities and saying no. And so you've just got to be willing and able to discern what really deserves your attention and what you need to say no to. So that would be an example of a technique that resulted. But it was really fun to explore these archetypes and just see how the stories supported them. And then of course we interviewed men too. So we interviewed over 70 people by the end of it all. And we would get the stories from the men about how the women around them show up and how they try to support the women in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And they would validate that a lot of these same traps are out there.
Yes.
So, yeah, so that's kind of how it all came together.
Love
And then, of
it.
course, in the middle of all the archetypes, so we have a chapter devoted to each one, but I also tell my own story.
Yes.
And so it's sort of a memoir as well.
Yes, yes, it is. It's kind of your memoir, but also this conversation is really about women and work and life and how we show up and how we show up, whether because we feel we have to show up that way. And I think a lot of it is these archetypes. It made me think of, they're kind of to an extent, they're all masks in a way, aren't they? It's kind of wearing whatever mask of the day you feel you have to wear, or the armor, or whatever it might be, in order to get through or to be able to succeed in that particular role.
Yeah, and it's really funny when I look back at my career journey because I went to work for one of the biggest companies in the world. I was in their leadership development plan. Every boss I had along the way had been there his or her whole career. And I thought I would do that too. And that was back in the day where that was pretty common. You didn't think about gig work and doing your own thing so much. Yeah, I'm going to date myself, but this was before the internet. And it's just funny because I thought I should have this career that would be very linear, very predictable. And I guess one of the ways, even though I was still that type A and hadn't quite found my balance, I did navigate a very unconventional career path for myself. And it usually was because of personal circumstances. So I left that high profile job because I had little kids and I didn't want to be gone so much because my husband was traveling and working a lot. So I started a company at 29 when young people weren't really starting companies like that too often. And it led me to over 100 companies over, I can't remember how many countries, but I was working on 6 continents at one point. I worked with a lot of different people. And it was really cool. And so I had a chance to learn a little about a lot of things. And then, of course, I went back corporate, which is kind of hard once you've been teaching people leadership. That was my business focus, was leadership facilitation and team building. So I knew all there was to know about how to be a great leader and how to build a great team. And it was great to share it with people. But as much as I knew, it was so hard to go back on the inside and practice all that. And so I've just had a chance along the way to carve out a pretty unconventional career in the name of trying to balance. And I would say, even though I was really frazzled, I think it worked out pretty well for my kids because I was able to be there for them and be at all the school programs and drive them around and do all the things when they were kids. And so it worked out pretty well. And so I wanted to share that. But I also know everybody has their own path. And I love that now in the workplace, we're seeing that you can wear those different hats and hopefully start to show up more as your authentic self. That I don't have to be so corporate right now. If my dog barks in the background, oh my gosh, that would have been a horrible thing 20 years ago because you didn't want to act like you wouldn't have a baby crying right next to you. And now it's like, some companies are letting mothers work part-time, work flexibly, work remotely when they have small children. It's so nice to see that options are opening up like that because flexibility is really the key. I mean, if you're going to remain open and try to find a balance that works, you can't be so rigidly structured all the time. And I think that's probably what I was learning and the message that I was conveying out there to the world when I was trying to do that. But that was the 90s and the early 2000s. And that was before it was really a thing. So it's just fun to kind of share all that in the book and also help people learn those lessons and pave their own way easier and with less pain than I did.
Definitely. It's interesting what you say about obviously the flexibility and that kind of flexibility being key, because I think regardless of which archetype you are, I think all women are wearing so many different hats that there is a need for some kind of level of flexibility. And I think that while obviously we've had COVID and kind of that, there was this time when we thought, wow, it's going to be this fully remote type of culture or more remote or whatever it might be. I think it does seem that actually we may be going back to, companies do want people to come back and all of those sorts of things. And it is actually still quite challenging. As you mentioned, there's examples in the book that are recent, things that are happening or conversations that are happening that are proving still to be extremely challenging. So I guess for women now, if you're in the corporate space, from whether it's the conversations that you've had, from your leadership kind of training or development experience, from your own experience and journey, what would you feel are kind of the key things that people need to keep in mind, or what are the biggest lessons that you really want kind of people to learn from your own experiences and from the book?
There's so many.
Mm.
But I think that really listening to what your employees need and listening with the intent to help make change and being brave enough to have those conversations is a start.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think if we just had a culture where we would focus on the output that people have in their jobs instead of the activities, like parking themselves at a desk, clocking in and clocking out, doing X number of hours of FaceTime every week in the office. We seem to be focused on the wrong priorities.
Mm.
And I think one of the reasons people are leaving the more traditional environments is because they feel like they're being watched for all the wrong reasons. And I'll just give you a little example. My sister has been a very successful bank executive for decades, and she was a good role model for me. But there were many years when her kids were little. She had 4 kids. She worked part-time, and she worked no more than 25 hours a week. And yet she would always win the award at the end of the year for one of the highest producing, highest quota. She'd be up there on stage and she'd be the only one that usually be the only female, and she'd be the only one that wasn't full time. And it just showed to me the power of, hey, give her a goal.
Yes.
And give her the flexibility to do it, and she'll do it. And it's just sad that we don't seem to be able to move past some of those old rules. And as much as we think it's more modern now, people are moved past this. The unfortunate part of leadership is that a lot of our leadership handbooks are the people who led us.
Yeah.
So if you had a really traditional leader and they instilled those values of, hey, you got to show up early and you got to be here a full day and you got to be in the office. Now we have a generation of leaders that have ascended into those C-suite positions that were trained by these really traditional leaders. And so it doesn't tend to go away as quickly as we think it should or would, because these cycles tend to perpetuate themselves because of the way that people were trained up when they started. And so I think we all have to kind of, we have to be brave, and we have to challenge those norms and challenge the types of, I guess, the unwritten rules about how we're going to work together and how we'll show up. And I will say, as someone who went back in to the inside and was a vice president until 2023, it takes a lot of courage to tell the truth and to question things. And I know that in my company and in most companies out there, there were executives who just wanted yes people, who just wanted someone to say, you're right, they should show up in the office. I wasn't that person. And in fact, when the CEO would ask me some questions point blank, and I knew what she wanted the answer to be, but I also knew what the real answer was, I would share the real answer, because I couldn't just perpetuate some of the stuff that was going on. And that was hard. And I saw a lot of people that had a lot of trouble summoning that leadership courage to have those conversations. But I think that's what it's going to take to try to break some of those long-standing stereotypes about how people should show up. And I think we're experiencing that right now as kind of that backlash with all the return to work stuff. It's like, if we were just concerned about people's productivity and what they were able to do, and we would unleash them to use their talents and not police the stuff that doesn't frankly matter, I think we'd be a whole lot better off. Easier said than done. I totally realize that, but it's a problem.
It comes with so many other problems, isn't it? You mentioned obviously going back onto the inside after kind of running your own business super successfully for such a long time. Firstly, navigating that transition must have been quite challenging.
Going from the helpful consultant,
Yes.
I had a session with the C-suite team of the company that I joined
Yes.
2 or 3 weeks before I joined it, and I was saying the things that needed to be said.
Mm,
I was saying, well, what do you really think is driving this issue? And I was kind of, when you're a consultant, you're able to say what somebody on the inside may not feel comfortable saying.
exactly.
Well, then I joined the company, and like 3 days into it, I was asked to give the CEO his 360 feedback. And I realized how different it was
Yeah.
on the inside. And I had many experiences like that because all of a sudden you're like, huh, if I tell him what I really think about this,
Mm,
he's got the ability to affect my career, my bonus. So it is different, and it's not easy. And that's actually one of my speaking topics is, what I learned after I thought I knew it all about leadership. Because it's one thing to know what to do, it's another thing to practice it. And I think any company probably has a mix of leaders who really do want to get the real unvarnished truth
mm.
and leaders who would just as soon not have it. And breaking through that's tough.
Having been, as you say, a consultant on that outside, where you do have that position,
Freedom.
freedom. Yeah, thank you. That's the word. The freedom to be able to say these things, because ultimately that's why you're there. You can be brutal. So tell us about, I guess, some of the lessons that you learned from that. What were some of the things that you saw that you feel, if there's kind of leaders listening now, male, female, whoever they are, what would you say? Look, these are some of the real, not necessarily quick fixes. I don't think there are quick fixes, but critical things that definitely need to be addressed if it's happening within your organization or within your team.
Yeah. There were two huge things
Mm,
that stood out to me as some of the major learnings going back in. And first of all, it's you can only affect change and transformation at a certain pace. So you have to really get comfortable with the pace at which a company can move forward,
mm,
because it's easy as a consultant to sit there and think, why haven't they done this yet? Why aren't they attacking the real problem? Why aren't they really working beyond the here and now to be more strategic? And the fact of the matter is, the here and now is what pays the bills. You've got production goals, you've got targets, you've got widgets you need to get out the door. And so you can't have 47 different change initiatives and have any of them succeed. And I think companies have a hard time just selecting three things to work on.
mm,
But the challenge is, if you select any more than that, it's like everything's a priority, so nothing is.
mm,
And so I think just starting to get more realistic about how to pace change was a huge learning. And of course, having a new leader come in kind of provided an excuse to accelerate that. But at the same time, I saw a lot of leaders make some missteps because they tried to do too much too soon, and they needed to be listening and learning before
mm.
trying to change everything. And I think as a consultant, they hire you because they need something fixed now.
Yeah.
And so I had to take my do it now habit and sort of think through a different kind of strategy about, okay, if I had to select just three things from operations and marketing and sales and HR and all these different initiatives, what would win?
Mm,
And what's really going to drive the impact now? And that's a tough, tough thing for companies to do. And I love to be able to help companies with that. The second huge learning for me was about the skill of influence,
mm,
because it's one thing to have great managerial skills. It's another thing to have tremendous leadership skills where you can cast a vision and gain followership. But it's something different entirely to help motivate and inspire people to greatness
mm.
when they don't report to you and they don't have to do what you say. And so how do you harness that where you craft your messages? I don't mean spin or anything like that, but it's like, how do you take, like, for instance, if you're a technical subject matter expert, how do you take all this knowledge
Mhm.
and boil it down into a couple of salient points that make people say, huh, I think I want to listen to that person. And I think what they're saying matters. And I think that that's something really good for us to focus on. And there's an art to that. And it's something that I think eludes a lot of people, and they kind of scratch their heads when they move into management and they think, huh, well, I've got the management skills and here I am in this position. Why aren't more people drawn to me and to my ideas? And where am I going wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to hone my skills in that area in a great way. And I really credit my boss. She was a great mentor to me. And I noticed she never had to raise her voice. She never had to get too insistent about things, because when she said things, they mattered,
Mm-hmm.
because she was a person who influenced the strategy. And that was really interesting to say, huh, sometimes it's just what you say and how you say it that will affect the tone, and you don't have to get super insistent. And the leaders who would yell and scream or get frustrated and show anger and stuff were not very successful inspiring people to come along with them. In fact, they kind of repelled people.
I love that.
So influence, and then also just the pace, those were two huge learnings.
I totally understand what you're saying about this change piece. I think often people want everything to change now, don't they? That's the thing. There's always a million and one change initiatives going on. But you're so
Well,
right. It makes it quite challenging.
it's so funny because we had one CEO who was kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say he perpetuated silos, but he was kind of like, okay, if I know what everybody's doing,
Mm,
then they can do their thing and they'll be okay.
right.
And then we had a CEO who was like, well, let's have you and you talk about it, what you're all doing and how it's going to step on each other's toes, or how you can coordinate that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, well, marketing has this and HR has this and IT has this. And that's where you can get into a lot of trouble in a hurry.
Yes, exactly. The silos. Oh my goodness, the silos.
Yeah.
In
Yes, we
terms
could
of
talk.
in terms of the influential piece, I find that such an interesting topic. What would you say then? I know you talked about the fact that it's the people who aren't shouting. It's about, I guess, it's the way that they're communicating. They're communicating when it's pertinent, and it's the way they communicate which is really inspiring people and causing people to listen and to take note, because they know that when this person says something, actually this thing needs to be done, this thing's really important. But what else do you feel in terms of the people you found to be influential, that you found to be great leaders through your own experience, through the mentors that you've had, through consulting? What do you think you've seen that you would say these are kind of the archetypes of great leadership
Yeah.
or
Well, I
influence
do think
even?
great influencers are great leaders. And when I say influencer, I'm not talking Instagram, social media influencers, real life. I mean, the people who they're genuine with their feelings, but they think about and regulate how they show them. So it's a lot of the emotional intelligence concepts that you'll hear from Daniel Goleman and all the people who talk about EQ. It's understanding where your natural strengths and challenges are. It's understanding how to collaborate with others and how to read what they need and see things through their eyes. Taking time to listen, taking time to really look people in the eye and collaborate and find out their perspective, not just when you need something. But it's sort of this whole proactive relationship building versus just reactive, oh, I better get so and so involved because I want him to buy in right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's people who really do try to develop relationships, and they're not necessarily relationship oriented people,
Right.
but they recognize the value in that.
Mm-hmm.
And effective leaders can be flexible enough to adapt to meet the needs of the situation, even if it's not their own personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
And they recognize that just because this is what they prefer doesn't mean that all their people tick that same way.
Mm-hmm.
And so they seek to try to understand and try to work with and through others. And they don't just take for granted that they have position power
Mm-hmm.
or knowledge power. And boy, wow, one of the biggest things is it doesn't matter how smart you are in terms of your IQ. I'll go toe to toe with the smartest person in the room any day of the week, not because I have the highest IQ, but because it is not what you know, it's how you use what you know. And having those people skills is every bit, if not more, important than having the technical skills. And where I've seen people really fall down is when they just depend too much on being smart and think that that should be enough. Because most people in companies, I'd like to think they're there because they're smart, because they have knowledge, because they know what they're doing. So it's not necessarily about those decisions. It's about how we're going to work together to get things done. And when we recognize the people side of things, we're better leaders.
I love that. Thank you so much. That answer was everything that we all needed to hear. Definitely is that EQ. I know we hear about EQ all the time, but it is such an essential piece, isn't it? And I think you can see where things are kind of falling apart or not working. It is often because you've got leadership that is not really focused necessarily on the people side of things or the relationship side of things. And it's, yes, they understand about the kind of technicals of the business, but that doesn't necessarily mean or translate into great leadership. So
Right.
true.
And being a coach, I have the benefit of getting to watch those interactions, see where they work and where they maybe go south. And so there's a lot you can learn just from investigating your own preferences and figuring out how to relate better to people who are very different than you are.
And I do appreciate and like the fact that you did say this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to actually be outwardly relationship focused naturally. So this kind of building of that network internally, if it's not something that comes naturally to you or it's not your preference, the great leaders, they understand that the necessity for it and they're doing it anyway. So it's about getting out of that comfort zone and just getting on and doing it for the kind of need of the business.
Right. Right.
Thank you so much. That was just golden. I think kind of these conversations around great leadership are so important because I've witnessed some great leadership and had really inspiring mentors, but also some scary leadership.
Me too. Me too. And you know what? I've made plenty of my own
Yeah.
mistakes as a leader too. So
Yes. And it
yeah.
absolutely, it's about that self-awareness, isn't it? I always say, if everybody can be more self-aware, we can constantly be, increasing our own self-awareness of kind of how we do things and where we're doing things not so well. That is such a powerful thing, isn't it? But not everybody is as self-aware as perhaps could
Yeah.
be
Or take
helpful.
yeah.
For sure. And I guess from the Rebalancing Act, what's kind of next then in terms of the book? You are hoping that people are going to take away these lessons and learn what you've taken, however long you've taken to learn them, and kind of not have to go through some of the pains and the kind of learning curves that you've gone through. And what else can people expect then?
Well, what's funny is in taking the next step, I have to say that this time a year ago when the book was about to be released,
Yes.
I didn't know where it was going, but it's a movement. And it was so funny because one day I typed in the Rebalancing Act to Google just to see what would come up. And it said, it's not a book. It's not just a book. It's a movement. And I was like, it's a movement.
Yes.
How about that? But what's happened as a result of all these conversations is that I've ended up creating a group called Rebalancing Revolution. And right now it's a women's group. I might have a men's group someday soon, but really trying to pour into women here right now. And it's a group where we meet virtually. So we're able to have people from everywhere meet and we support and encourage each other and we're supporting each other's growth. We have amazing guest speakers. And it's just a group to help people along the way find out what their legacy is, focus on what matters, and help each other get there. And so that's been huge. It's been so exciting. It's like bringing together all these amazing women from all over the place to help each other and be a sounding board for each other. And so that's one thing you can expect to see continuing. And then I'm out there trying to get the message out.
Love that.
Focus on what matters. Let the other stuff go. Don't worry about what everybody says you should do. Worry about what feeds your soul, and just trying to get that message to more people so that more people can feel fulfilled instead of just being filled with things to do.
I love that so much.
Who knows? There might be a new Rebalancing Act version 2. I don't know. Helping businesses rebalance or something like that somewhere down the line.
Love it. I love it. But I mean, for now, there's so much that book has to offer. And as you said, the group and the community that you've built, this movement, who is this for? It sounds to me like it's for most women, quite frankly, because most people, at many stages in their life will kind of be, as you say, going through that time when they're not necessarily feeling fulfilled. They're kind of going through these motions. They're maybe feeling a bit stuck or whatever it might be. So would you say that if you're in any of these types of scenarios, then this is definitely a group for you? What sort of person
Yeah.
would the group
I
work
mean,
for?
we interviewed people from 20 something to 70 something.
Right.
And the people who are older and more wise are saying it's never too early to learn these lessons. The
Mm-hmm.
earlier you can learn them,
Mm-hmm.
the better you'll be able to balance all these competing demands.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing I would say is it's not just for women.
Mm-hmm.
It's for the men who love women and support them and work with women.
Yes.
And I've been surprised and just really happy that men are finding this book very helpful as well. So, I mean, it's really a book for anyone. Not everyone that I interviewed still works or has always worked outside the home. You can be very, very busy and have trouble balancing without having full time employment, too. So, but definitely anyone who feels like there's just a lot to do and not enough time to do it all would benefit from reflecting on the lessons from the book.
Love that. Which is most people, I imagine, which is too many people for sure. Fantastic. Well, that's everything. So make sure you go out and get the book, The Rebalancing Act, because like I said, I'm getting through it and I'm absolutely loving it. And it is definitely eye-opening, the kind of the stories and the experiences, but also kind of seeing yourself within the different archetypes is very interesting as well. So I definitely highly recommend it. How can people find out more about the community and about this movement that's being built?
Yes.
And how can they get
And
involved?
very easy. Everything's on my website, and it's my name, carolenneking.com. And they can find all the information there. Also, the books are available anywhere you can buy books, and we have audiobooks now too. So I'm the narrator for the audiobook. That was
Love
fun.
it.
So yeah, so it should be really easy to find things just with a quick Google search or by going to my website.
Fantastic. We'll obviously link everything up so nobody will be lost for sure.
And
Definitely.
I should say social media. How can I not say social
Of
media?
course.
You can find me on all the handles, on all the channels.
At Carol Enneking. Love it.
Yes.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Carol, for sharing your experiences, your expertise from a kind of leadership perspective as someone who's gone through so many kind of trials and tribulations and found your own rebalancing or reached a place of balance yourself. And now is obviously helping so many other women to do the same. So thank you so much. It's been fantastic to have you on.
Thank you, Antoinette.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it and I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Carol. Don't forget to grab your copy of the Rebalancing Act. It's definitely worth a read. Now, if you're going through your own transition, whether you're trying to rebuild your life after a turning point, or you're trying to reimagine your life, or you're trying to build a business, definitely you don't have to do it alone. That's what this channel is for. Remember, keep growing, keep building with intention and with soul. Till next time, bye for now.